Today is Thursday, August 27th, 2026, and today is National Just Because Day, which may be the only observance that comes with a complete explanation built into the name. Why did you buy yourself a donut? Just because. Why are you wearing the good socks on a Thursday? Just because. Honestly, that's a level of confidence most of us could use. And we've got quite a day ahead of us. A man drills a hole everyone thinks is ridiculous and changes the world. An island makes a sound heard nearly 3,000 miles away. And a flying nanny finally arrives in Hollywood after a very long argument with the woman who created her. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone who's learned that the smallest historical details are often where the biggest stories begin. In 1857, Edwin Drake arrived in Titusville, Pennsylvania, with what sounded like a truly terrible business plan. He was going to drill for oil. Now, people already knew there was oil in the area. It seeped naturally out of the ground, collected on the surface of ponds, and generally made a mess of things. People skimmed it up with blankets, used some of it as medicine, which I'm sure tasted exactly as good as you're imagining, and had started realizing that refined oil could be useful for lighting lamps. But drilling a well specifically to find the stuff? That was different. At the time, drilling was something you did for water or salt. The idea that somebody could sink a hole in the ground and bring up enough oil to build a business around it seemed ridiculous. And people made sure Drake knew it. His project became known as Drake's Folly, which is history's favorite way of announcing that somebody is about to become inconveniently correct. Drake hired a local blacksmith and experienced salt well driller named William Smith, better known as Uncle Billy, and the two of them got to work. Almost immediately, the earth refused to cooperate. The sides of the hole kept collapsing. Water kept pouring in, so Drake came up with a solution. Drive an iron pipe down through the loose soil until it reached solid bedrock, then lower the drill through the pipe. It worked, but it wasn't fast. Using a steam engine, Uncle Billy drilled roughly 3 feet a day. 3 feet. That means you could spend an entire day surrounded by noise, steam, mud, and people laughing at you, then look down and think, great, we're 3 feet closer to possibly nothing. Eventually, even Drake's investors had had enough. They sent instructions telling him to shut the whole operation down. Drake hadn't received those instructions yet, though, so he borrowed $500 locally and kept going. And on Saturday, August 27th, 1859, the drill reached a depth of 69.5 feet. They stopped for the day. There was no dramatic fountain of oil blasting into the sky. Nobody threw a hat in the air. As far as they knew, they still had hundreds of feet left to drill. But the next morning, Uncle Billy looked down into the pipe and noticed fluid rising near the top. It was oil. When Drake returned on Monday, he found Uncle Billy surrounded by barrels, tubs, and jars, basically every available container trying to catch it. The hole everyone had laughed at was producing oil, and it turned out Drake had been incredibly lucky. In that particular spot, the oil was unusually close to the surface. A few feet in either direction, and Drake's Folly might have remained exactly that. Instead, word spread. People flooded into the area, derricks appeared everywhere, and quiet Pennsylvania towns turned into oil boom towns almost overnight. Drake hadn't discovered oil, but he had shown that it could be deliberately drilled for and produced commercially. That little 69.5-foot hole helped launch the modern petroleum industry. And if a narrow pipe in Pennsylvania could reveal something that powerful beneath the ground, 24 years later, an island in Indonesia was about to show what else the earth had been keeping under pressure. Krakatoa, more accurately called Krakatoa, sat in the Sunda Strait between the Indonesian islands of Java and Sumatra. The volcano had been rumbling for months. There had been eruptions, columns of smoke, falling ash, all the signs that this was not a mountain having a quiet summer. Then, on August 26, 1883, the eruption intensified. And on the morning of August 27th, Krakatoa exploded in a series of 4 enormous blasts. The final explosion was so powerful that people on the island of Rodriguez, nearly 3,000 miles away, heard what they thought was a distant cannon fire. 3,000 miles. That's not somebody in the next town saying, "Did you hear that?" That's somebody on the other side of an ocean hearing a volcano. The eruption blasted more than 4 cubic miles of debris into the atmosphere. Much of the island collapsed, and massive tsunamis struck the coast of Java and Sumatra. More than 36,000 people were killed, most of them by the waves. And the effects didn't stop anywhere near Indonesia. Pressure instruments around the world recorded the atmospheric shock wave from the explosion. The wave traveled around the entire planet, not once, but repeatedly. Scientists examining the records counted 7 passages, 4 moving away from Krakatoa and 3 returning after circling the globe. The volcano had essentially rung the atmosphere like a bell. Ash and aerosols spread high through the sky, creating strange colors and spectacular sunsets around the world. People thousands of miles away had no idea why the evening sky had suddenly turned such intense shades of red, orange, and purple. For months afterward, people who had never heard of Krakatoa looked up at the sunset created by dust from an island on the other side of the world. The eruption was over in hours. Its light stayed in the sky for years. Krakatoa left color hanging in the sky for years. But if you'd prefer something a little less terrifying up there, we can always go with a woman floating over London beneath an umbrella. Because on August 27, 1964, Mary Poppins had its lavish Hollywood premiere at Grauman's Chinese Theater, and it almost didn't exist. Walt Disney had been trying to get the film rights from author P.L. Travers for more than 15 years. His daughters loved her Mary Poppins books, and Walt was convinced they could become a wonderful movie. Travers was convinced Walt Disney would ruin them. She didn't want her sharp, mysterious Nanny turned into a sweet, cheerful cartoon character. She didn't want unnecessary musical numbers, and she definitely didn't want animation. So there was some tension. Eventually, Disney gave Travers approval over the final script, and she agreed to work with the studio. But agreed to work with is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Meetings between Travers and the creative team were recorded at her request, and you can hear her objecting to details large and small. She questioned words, colors, character choices, songs, just about everything. Meanwhile, the Sherman brothers were writing music. Julie Andrews had been cast as Mary. Dick Van Dyke was preparing to do whatever that accent was. And the studio was combining live action with animation in ways that required some of the most complicated effects Disney had ever attempted. The final movie included dancing penguins, carousel horses, chimney sweeps floating through the air, and an entire world that sounded like someone tripped while carrying a dictionary. Travers was not pleased. When the finished film premiered, she especially disliked the animated sequence. She reportedly approached Walt afterward and told him the animation needed to be removed from the movie that had just premiered. Disney's answer was essentially, that ship has sailed. And sail it did. Mary Poppins became Disney's most successful feature up to that point. It received 13 Academy Award nominations and won 5, including Best Actress for Julie Andrews, Best Original Song for Chim Chim Cheery, and Best Visual Effects. So the movie audiences adored was also the movie its creator tried to edit after the premiere. That's awkward. But there's something interesting about a performance becoming larger than anyone expected. Especially when the person doing the performing discovers that entertaining people can become something much more serious. Imagine being born so completely into show business that your mother returned to the stage 2 days after giving birth to you. By the age of 3, you're part of the family's vaudeville act. You grow up singing, dancing, and learning how to make an audience laugh before most children have figured out how to sit through dinner. As an adult, you develop a huge singing voice, fearless physical comedy, and famously wide smile that earns you the nickname the Big Mouth. You appear on Broadway, in movies, on radio, and eventually on television. You work alongside people like Charlie Chaplin, Bing Crosby, W.C. Fields, Judy Garland, and Bob Hope. That would be a pretty full career. But then the United States enters World War II and you join the USO. You travel overseas to entertain troops in England and North Africa. And when you aren't performing, you help in military hospitals because you've trained as a nurse's aide. You clean wounds. You prepare patients for surgery. You donate blood. You go places other entertainers won't go because the troops in the most remote locations are often the ones who need a laugh the most. And you don't stop with World War II. You return during the Korean War and again during the Vietnam War. Members of the Special Forces make you an honorary Green Beret, and soldiers begin calling you Colonel Maggie. The woman behind that enormous voice and even bigger life was Martha Raye, born Margie Reed on August 27, 1916. For more than 60 years, she entertained people on stage and on screen. But to generations of service members, she was more than a visiting celebrity. She was someone who showed up, stayed, helped, and kept coming back. In 1993, after veterans gathered tens of thousands of signatures supporting her, Martha Raye received the Presidential Medal of Freedom for her service. A hole in Pennsylvania became an industry. An eruption in Indonesia touched the atmosphere around the entire planet. A fiercely protected children's character became a movie loved by generations, and a comedian discovered that her greatest role happened far from any theater. Sometimes the strangest part of a story is how far one small beginning can travel. Anyway, since it's Just Because Day, go do something harmless that makes absolutely no practical sense. If someone questions you, smile confidently and offer them some good advice you have no intention of following. As Oscar Wilde put it, the only thing to do with good advice is to pass it on. It is never of any use to oneself. If you'd like to hear more of my work or see other corners of the internet I've been quietly building things in, you can head over to waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns. Thanks for hanging out with me for a few minutes. I'll see you tomorrow.